and welcome to another Stitchmastery tutorial with Amanda from Atlas Knits. In this video, we'll be going over how to create a new custom stitch from scratch. If this is your first time using Stitchmastery and you've never been in the Tools Preferences menu yet, please check out the Setting Up a Namespace video as well as Creating a User Stitch Library video before you attempt this video, or you'll end up in an error state. Sometimes in Stitchmastery, the default stitches just don't do it for you and you have to start from scratch. The easiest way to create a new stitch is to duplicate an existing stitch and modify it, but you can also create a new stitch entirely from scratch. To create a new stitch from scratch, first we want to access the stitch library that we're using, and we can do that in a couple of different ways. The first way is to go to Tools, Preferences, Stitch Libraries, User Libraries, select the stitch library that we're using, and click Edit View. You can also get to that same screen from right-clicking on any of the stitches in the palette and clicking Customize. Once you're on the screen, you can create a new stitch by clicking on New Stitch. And now we have to enter some information about this stitch. And the first two areas are for stitch count. So basically we need to put in how many stitches does this stitch consume and how many stitches does this stitch produce. And this will affect your stitch counts if you're using that feature in Stitchmastery. For consuming, we want to enter how many stitches this stitch uses. So for example, a knit two together uses 2 stitches and it produces 1 stitch. Whereas a knit front back uses 1 stitch, but it produces 2 stitches. In this case, I'm just going to create a simple 4-stitch cable. So I'm going to have it consume 4 stitches and I'm going to produce 4 stitches. We're going to give it a name, and this is what's going to be displayed in the palette. So I'm going to call this Custom 4-Stitch Cable. And the abbreviation will be used in the written instructions, as well as anywhere else you have abbreviations configured to be used in Stitchmastery. So I'm just going to call this one Cable for C, so C for Custom. The display string is how you want this to appear basically anywhere. Like if it was a knit, instead of saying K for the abbreviation, it would say knit. So display string, I can just put in Cable for Custom, or you can put in anything like that, and then the long description is used for the actual instructions as a reference. So I could say slip 1 stitch to cable needle, etc. and so forth. I won't actually fill out the whole thing. You can choose a mirror and wrong side stitch. These are really helpful if you're using the flip functions in Stitchmastery. And then the appearance is where we can create the appearance of our stitch. I'm going to skip over that just for now. And then drawer is where we want the stitch to appear in our palette. So there's basic stitches, knit increases, etc. I'm going to leave it in custom stitches, that's fine. And I'm going to add it to the end of the drawer. Now I want to add the appearance of this cable. So I'm going to click Added Appearance. There are 4 fonts that Stitchmastery includes by default, but you can use any font on your computer to create a custom stitch. The first thing that we want to take a look at is what font we want to use. So there's Stitchmastery cable, cable EH, cable EH, cable, and dash. We'll use these in a minute. Typically you're going to want to scale to the width of the stitch, not to the height of the stitch unless you have an error. You can choose your default background color. I always just choose none because I want it to take the color from the yarn if I'm doing color work. And foreground color you can't change. This part is really important. The number of columns occupied by the stitch in the chart is going to be how many stitches this thimble is displayed over. So since I'm using a 4-stitch cable and it's consuming and producing 4 stitches, I want to choose 4 from this. And you'll notice here at the bottom where this little white square is, it changed size. So if I go back to 1, see how it's only got 1 square, and I changed it to 4, and now I have 4 squares to work with. That's a really important step that you don't want to miss. Now down here it says Unicode. You might be wondering what Unicode is. So basically every one of these stitches and every one of these fonts has a system nickname, if you will. If I click on this, it puts in this Unicode code for that symbol. And that's what will help make it appear down here in this area. This is giving me an area that the text is higher than the cell size, so I can change it to scale to height, and then I can see that that symbol that I chose appears in the menu. Now, you aren't limited to using one symbol, and so this can be really helpful for when you're creating cables. So if you use these cable symbols, you can actually put multiple in to create these custom cable symbols. Say I wanted to, start with this one, and then I want to put in this one, and I don't know, dash. And some of them stack on top of each other. You have to play with them to see which ones will work side by side and which ones stack on top of each other. It's just a learning curve that is trial and error. There's not much documentation on using these symbols in the Stitchmastery documentation, so you basically kind of have to discover it a little bit yourself. You'll notice that if you use the built-in cable symbols, they do automatically scale to the area that is available to them. You can always clear out what you've done by clicking clear or just deleting the Unicode in there. Something else that you can do is, just keep combining these sort of things to create your own symbol. The other thing that you can do is you can also use other fonts on your computer, so you can even use like wingdings, and you can make a flower stitch if you want, or these circle numbers, whatever you need to do to create your custom stitch. You are limited to the fonts that you have available on your computer, so if you're looking for a custom stitch symbol that you can't create by combining other stitch symbols, or you can't find it in a font, basically you might have to hire a graphic designer to help you. All in all, it is pretty straightforward, and you can use this. Once you've decided what symbol you want to use for your cable, just click OK, and click OK. And then if you look in the drawer that you added that stitch to, it will show up in that drawer and you can start using it. Hope this tutorial was helpful for you, and if you would like additional information on how to create stitches by duplicating stitches, check out my other video, Customizing Stitches in Stitchmastery. Are you finding value in this free content? Consider becoming a Patreon supporter and getting access to behind the scenes, an exclusive community, and some awesome perks. Check it out at patreon.com/atlasknits.